I would now like to call to order the October 2nd Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. We'd like to begin with a roll call.
Obleton. Gleason. Here. Wills.
Here.
Lord.
Here.
Hodges.
Here.
Rasso Adela. Holloway.
Here.
Johnson R. excused. Nolan.
Here.
Gilmore. Cooper.
Here.
Patel. Rasso Allen excused. Kiefer excused. Bird excused.
And we do have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Next up is citizens with CAC business to present to the CAC. Please note that at any time, individuals may address the CAC on matters of CAC business. This is not an opportunity for questions and answers with the CAC. In accordance with open meetings laws, the CAC cannot take action on any complaints or suggestions tonight and cannot respond to any allegations at this time. Please identify yourself for the record. There is a 5-minute time limit. Okay, seeing that there's no citizens with CAC business, we'll move to the next item, which is the approval and review of the July 10th meeting minutes.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been motion and second to approve the minutes of the July 10th meeting. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Next is the review and acceptance of the financial report through the month of June. Any motions?
I'll make a motion to accept the report as presented.
Okay.
And I make a motion to second it.
Okay, it's been motion and seconded, but we have a question?
Yeah, I'm looking over this and under housing here, it'd be the third one down.
Yes.
My question is we've spent like 87% of the money and then 31%. And then up above that one is $200,000. At this late in the game, I thought that money should have been spent by now, or how's this all work?
Sure, I can give some clarity. So if you look towards the bottom of the report, the very bottom black heading says program income, and HUD requires that we spend all program income first. So if you see for both economic development and housing, there are program income lines. So as we earn program income each month, we have to spend that first before we can spend any of our entitlement money. Then if you look directly above program income, there's a black heading that says prior year CDBG funds. Those are funds that are rolled over from prior years, and we have to spend those after program income, but before we spend current year money. So you kind of have to spend the money in order, program income first, and then oldest money first, and then newest money. So if you see there under economic development and under housing, we've spent, the vast majority of those funds have been spent down, those both the program income and the prior year funds. And those have to be spent before we can spend the current year there up in the top section. So this is the June report, which means it's the last one for the fiscal year that ended June 30th of 2023. And what will happen when you come back, ideally next month, hopefully, just depends on how quickly our finance department gets the report to us. But those kind of balance funds from the top section will, for housing and economic development, will roll down and become part of that prior year block. So it kind of rolls into the revolving loan fund, becomes available to spend next year, and then the newly awarded funds for the year we're in will take place up at the top there. So it's kind of this constant sort of The money starts at the top and sort of works its way down to prior year, and each year we kind of roll through it. But you do have to look at the funds in their whole, in their totals, which would be, the current year, year 48 funds, the prior year funds, and the program income funds totaled together. And the order they're spent is kind of a requirement of HUD, but in the CAC, just kind of think of it as just one big total. We just have to spend them in a certain order, if that makes sense. That said, the leftover funding from admin, from the admin category, from the housing rehab fund category will become part of the reprogramming process. So when we come back here in November, we will have a reprogramming vote of the CAC. So any funds that are available at the year end become available to be reallocated through a reprogramming process by the CAC at the November meeting.
Thank you for that. Do you anticipate, is there a pipeline for additional monies to be spent in
So in the,
economic development?
yes, so in the housing and economic development categories both, there's always more projects that are, obligated than are spent. So there's, quite a number of projects in the works for housing and economic development. So those balances in large part are spoken for, they just haven't been actually expended out the door yet. So that is kind of where we're at with those. So I do anticipate we won't have trouble spending down those extra dollars, or those leftover dollars.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Okay, it's been motioned and seconded for the financial report. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Thank you. Next is an action item. It is our year 50 local objectives. Turn your packets and give it to you, Heather.
Okay, so just kind of, I always try to give like a little snapshot of where we've been that tells you how we got where we are, and then a preview of where we're going next. So if you recall, last time we met was in July, and the CAC reviewed a public input plan. So we were planning at that time to do a survey, to do some public meetings and in-person opportunities, an online virtual public input meeting in an attempt to get current opinions from the community about what the needs are in the city. So if you recall, the city has a 5-year plan that we have to do for HUD. So each year within that 5-year plan, you do an annual plan. So you kind of get a big flush of public input when you do the 5-year plan. And then each annual plan, you have to do like, a kind of a refresher, a little kind of check in to see, is this what we expect? Is this what we still need? And so the public input that we gathered over the summer is for our year 50 CDBG plan. That will be for the fiscal year that starts July 1st of 2024, so the upcoming year. So we went out, we gathered a bunch of public input, which is summarized here, and that public input will be used in the allocation process. So we're preparing to go into the year 50 allocation process. To do that, we need 2 things. One is local objectives, that is saying to our applicants, in this current year that's coming up, this is what we want you to be working towards. And then we need the application approved. So at this month's meeting, we'll work on the local objectives. And at the November meeting, we will look at the application form. And the CAC can recommend any tweaks or changes that you might be interested in. So that's kind of where we've been, where we are right now, and where we're going into the application cycle. So these local objectives that we're working on tonight are going to be they'll become part of the application for year 50 funds. And what they are is kind of looking at the 5-year plan, what needs we had when we did the 5-year plan, looking at the current public input, seeing if those still agree, and then looking at a number of required studies that HUD requires that we do. They require that we look at census data. They require that we have something called an analysis of impediments to fair housing, and they require that we have something called a housing needs assessment. So the city has all of those documents. They're kind of 5-year documents that we get. So there hasn't been any changes in those documents in the current year. The only thing that has been updated for the current year is that public input. So if you look at your last sheet of paper, the front side of your last sheet of paper, which every month I say I'm gonna put numbers on these pages and I forget, so sorry about that. You can see there's a table here. It starts on this page and it goes on to the back side, and there are 4 columns. So the first column is summarizing the American Community Survey. That's the census data that HUD requires that we look at. There has been no change. They have not issued any new American Community Survey data since this data that we have incorporated here. The analysis of impediments to fair housing, that second column, that was completed in 2019, and that's a 5-year document, so it isn't time yet to update that. We'll be updating that next year in preparation for our consolidated plan. So there is no change there from last year. The housing needs assessment, likewise, there's no change in that column. That's a 5-year document, so that was contracted and completed in 2020, and we'll be completing that in the next year or so to update it for the next 5-year plan. So the first 3 columns are those of you who were here last year. There have been no changes in those. The final column is the community input results for the year that we're heading into. So in summary, we did a survey, got about 150 responses to the survey. We did a virtual public input meeting, which we had a number of attendees to that virtual meeting. And we did 3 in-person public input kind of open houses at the libraries. And we had some attendees from those as well. And at the meetings, both the virtual meeting and the in-person ones, we asked kind of similar questions to what we ask on the survey. So we say, here are all the different things that CDBG can do. There's 4 main categories: infrastructure, housing, economic development, and public services. We asked the participants to prioritize those 4 categories, and then within each of those 4 categories to pick their top 3 need. The column there that you see that's in your packet kind of summarizes the results of that. There's more detailed information available in the pages preceding it, but this is sort of the summary table, I guess you could say. So with that in mind, you would want to look back at the page before that table, and it kind of summarizes for you the 4 under recommendations. It lists for you the 4 needs that are identified in our consolidated plan. Those are already in place and aren't changed. It identifies you the 3 local objectives that were used for the year 49 allocation cycle. And then the next 3 bullets are your options. So the CAC can choose to use the same exact ones if you like, if they're still supported by the public input that's been done. You could devise entirely new ones if you would so choose, throughout the ones from the current year and make entirely new ones. Or you could take the ones that you have and tweak them, revise them in whole or in part to meet the objectives that you would like next year's CDBG application to reflect. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we're tasked with completing tonight.
Thank you. Thoughts? Are there any thoughts? Mr. Ogleton?
So
Joe?
we have 4 categories that already.
Mike, please.
We have 4 categories that already been set for the last 5 years. And then the community input is the major one that we are basing something on from, that we got this year.
So I can read, if it would be helpful, I can read the current local objectives, just so we're clear of which ones we're talking about. But yes, in the table, there are 3 columns that are unchanged, and in the table, only the 4th column is the
Okay.
updated information. Under recommendations, the first set of bullets, those are the needs in the 5-year plan, and those don't change. The second set of bullets are the current year local objectives, which can change in whole or in part, if you would so choose. And the last set of bullets there are your choices of how you could go about that. But the local objectives that are in place for the program year that we're currently in today, the ones that are currently effective, are improve the livability of Davenport neighborhoods, including availability of decent, affordable housing for owners and renters and neighborhood infrastructure citywide. Support programs to retain existing businesses and attract new businesses with an emphasis on increasing employment and business opportunities for younger workers, low to moderate income households, and minorities. And the third one is provide support for human needs for the citizens of Davenport, emphasizing mental health services and building life skills. So those are the local objectives that are currently in place. And kind of, if you want to think about buckets, the first one has traditionally been the bucket where we would see housing and infrastructure type of applications. The second one would be the bucket where we would see economic development type of applications. And the third one would be the one where we would see our public service applications. So those would be our nonprofit agencies for the most part. But you're not bound to those. They've been tweaked and added and subtracted and changed over the years, and there's nothing sacred about them, but they have worked historically, but it would be up to the CAC how you would want to handle that for the year going forward.
I had a question about the housing. Is there a particular geographical boundary for this development of affordable housing, or is it citywide?
CDBG does not put any boundary on the use of the funding, except that it has to be within the boundaries of Davenport, and it has to benefit low and moderate income residents. And so with housing, we're typically talking about individual households, and wherever they may live, or choose to live, or wherever a developer might choose to develop, as long as the units are occupied by low and moderate income households, there's no restriction on where they can be, as long as they're within the city of Davenport. Now, when we talk about area benefit activities, so that would be an infrastructure type of activity. So you're fixing a street. That would have a geographic restriction in the sense that it has to be a majority low-income neighborhood that you would do that, infrastructure work in. So the majority of the beneficiaries of that kind of activity would have to be low and moderate income. And geographically speaking, you've got to look at census data and find neighborhoods that fit that requirement. So it's only a geographic restriction in the sense that it has to be a low and moderate income area. But housing in and of itself, it's based on the unit, and the unit can be anywhere as long as it's in the city. Did you need some water? There's a fridge right here. Are you sure? Okay.
So are we to make a motion to approve the local objectives this evening?
For tonight, we would need to leave the meeting with some local objectives. You know, that motion can take a number of forms. It could be a motion to reuse the ones we have in place. It could be a motion to use the ones we have in place, but with some wording changes, or it could be a motion to approve entirely different or additional local objectives, if that would be the desire of the CAC. As long as those local objectives are in keeping with the public input that's been received and the needs that are already in place in the 5-year plan.
Go ahead,
I'll
Louise.
make a motion to accept it under the 5-year plan as the way we've been doing business.
Okay, thank you.
The-
There's a motion on the floor. Mr. Opelton?
Okay, well, first, I'll second this motion so we can then discuss it.
Okay. The motion is seconded. Any discussion?
From what I'm getting then, some of the stuff is specific for areas based on income, and others is for the whole city. Okay.
Yes. So these are HUD definitions, and let me just be clear that at the program and project level, like when we're evaluating applications, the staff will make a determination of eligibility. The CAC doesn't have to make a determination of eligibility. But yes, housing activities are limited exclusively to low and moderate income households wherever in the city they might live. Public service activities require that at least 70% of the beneficiaries be low and moderate income residents. And infrastructure type of activities require that they take place in a neighborhood that is majority low and moderate income. And economic development also has to be a majority.
Great. Clarification. So let's say I'm building a housing unit. Do they have to participate in a particular program that focuses on individuals at low to moderate income, or just if the tenant is low to
So
moderate income?
in terms of development or rehabilitation, that takes a number of forms. So in terms of renter development, usually the developer is applying to the city for funding to either create new housing or rehabilitate housing that already exists. And in return for funding, which is subsidy, the developer makes a commitment, which is, you know, recorded in contracts and deed restrictions, that they're going to reserve a certain number of units for low and moderate income households for a certain amount of time. And so, and then through a process of monitoring over the course of however many years that agreement is for, then the city is going to make sure that the developer is following what they agreed to. But the way it works typically is they get the money up front to get the project done, you know, to get it rehabbed or built. And then as time goes on, you know, they meet their requirement over a number of years to retain those units as affordable units, is typically how that will work.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's been motion second. Any further discussion?
I just have one quick question. On our motion, should we have Mr. Wills amend it to talk about the local objectives so that it's a little bit clearer?
I would agree. If you would like, I can read them, and then if that suits the intention of your motion, then that way they're in the record of what it is that we're actually approving.
Okay.
Would that,
I'll just amend it right now.
Okay.
To include the local objectives.
okay, to reuse the local objectives from year 49? And Mr. Obleton, as the second, do you agree to that amendment?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Ms. Gleason?
Okay, I think we should include the options to be discussed later. Is that how we can do that? Because they might be different.
The options,
The year 50, okay, so several of the options for year 50, local objectives. And was that what you were trying to?
No,
That we could,
No, and when he gave his motion, he didn't talk about rolling the year 49 local objectives into
The year 50,
I knew what
okay,
he was
I was
saying,
thinking
but
of
I
that.
thought, when I was thinking about it in my mind, I thought, yeah, we need to clarify
right.
that,
I
that
just,
we're rolling the 49 into the 50.
okay, I just needed
We're just having
better,
a discussion down here.
No, no, thank you.
all right.
That is
I
great.
understand better now.
No, I appreciate the clarification as well. I was going to suggest it before we voted, but you beat me to it. So thank you. You're always on top of it, Tammy.
Okay, to roll 49 into 50.
Yes. So Heather, I will ask that you restate the motion, and then we will vote on it. Thank you.
So the motion was made by Mr. Wills to reuse the year 49 local objectives for year 50. And I will read what those local objectives are for the record. The first one for year 50 will be improve the livability of Davenport neighborhoods, including the availability of decent, affordable housing for owners and renters and neighborhood infrastructure citywide. The second one will be support programs to retain existing businesses and to attract new businesses with an emphasis on increasing employment and business opportunities for younger workers, low to moderate income households, and minorities. And the third one will be provide support for human needs for the citizens of Davenport, emphasizing mental health services and building life skills.
Thank you. It's been seconded by Mr. Overton. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you all. Next on the agenda is other business before the CAC.
So I would draw your attention to in your packet. We did provide for you the schedule, or the expected schedule for the allocation process. Just again, to give you a snapshot of where we're going. The CAC has voted to recommend local objectives tonight. Those local objectives will go to City Council for approval later this month. And then once approved, they will be used in the year 50 application process. So when we meet, the CAC will meet in November, and at the November meeting, we have a full schedule, so please plan to attend. We will have reprogramming, so that would be making a distribution plan for any funding left over from year 48 to be used in year 50. We will have a review of the year 50 application. So we'll have the draft application, the CAC can review and make comments upon it, any suggestions that you might have. And then the other thing that will happen in November, if there are any audit extension requests, so any agency that was funded in the year that ended June 30th has until December 31st to submit their audit. And if they don't think they're going to make that deadline, they have to submit an audit extension request to the CAC by November 1st. So by the time you all meet in November, we will know if we have any audit extension requests, and so then the CAC will need to take action on them if we have any. So November will be a busy meeting, please plan to attend. But in return for that attendance, we do not expect any business in December. So assuming all issues can be resolved at the November meeting, at that meeting, there could be a decision made about whether or not to actually hold the December meeting. And then from there, we go into the allocation cycle in truth, because we as staff will hold the application workshop at the end of November. And that's the meeting at which anybody who wants to apply for CDBG funds, any agency, will attend, and we'll kind of tell them the application rules and what they'd be committing to and all of that kind of stuff. And then they will have 1 month to complete their applications, return them to us by the beginning of January. At the January CAC meeting, we will distribute those applications to you, the CAC members. Then in January, on the 17th, we'll have a work session. And in February, at the CAC meeting, we will have our application presentations. And then March already will be the allocation meeting again. So it just seems like, it's just a cycle that never ends. So But the work begins in earnest. We'll have a packed meeting in November. You'll have, most likely, unless something pressing arises, the opportunity to elect to cancel the December meeting if you choose. But then everything from January to March will be a very necessary meeting.
Heather, I had one thought that just popped in my mind. I believe that Election Day is the 7th. And I want to make sure that no one had any,
Oh, that's a good point. I didn't think of that.
any, any outstanding commitments they need to do.
So there have been some years, just for those of you who are newer, depending on kind of the year and the cycle, many of our CAC members have historically been active. And there have been years where the CAC has elected to delay the November meeting by a week if we have members who are very busy with election type of activities. So that would be an option if you would choose to do so. You would just need to vote on that if you would like.
Okay. I would ask anyone who have concerns, contact Heather this week. So, great. Any other questions? Next, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All right, it's been moved and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Thank you. That concludes the October 2nd Citizen Advisory Committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I hope you all had a nice summer. We didn't see much of you.